Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Facade. The suburban house on Maple Street looked perfect from the outside. Manicured lawn, white picket fence, and a family that seemed to have it all. Inside, however, the Sparks household was anything but harmonious. Mitch Sparks sat at the kitchen table, methodically eating his cereal while his wife Beverly paced around the kitchen, her phone constantly buzzing with text messages. She'd grown more distant over the past 6 months, always finding excuses to leave the house, always with somewhere urgent to be. "Dad, can I get a car for my birthday?" 17-year-old Scott demanded, not bothering to look up from his phone. "All my friends have cars, and I'm tired of looking like a loser." Mitch looked at his son calmly. "We'll see, Scott. Cars are expensive, and I'm just a simple office worker." Beverly snorted from across the kitchen. "Simple is right," she muttered, just loud enough for everyone to hear. 14-year-old Katie shifted uncomfortably in her chair. She was the only one who seemed to notice the tension that had been building in their home. "Maybe we could look at used cars," she suggested quietly. "Katie, don't enable him," Beverly snapped. "Your father needs to learn to provide for his family properly." Mitch continued eating his cereal, seemingly unbothered by his wife's barbs. He'd perfected this act over the years, the mild-mannered husband who took whatever was thrown at him. But behind his calm exterior, his mind was always working, always observing, always calculating. That evening, as Beverly claimed she was going to her book club for the 3rd time that week, Mitch decided to follow her. He waited 10 minutes after she left, then got in his old sedan and drove to the upscale part of town. Beverly's car was parked outside the Grandview Hotel. From the shadows of the parking lot, Mitch watched as Beverly met Dennis Townsend at the hotel entrance. Dennis was everything Mitch appeared not to be: tall, confident, wearing an expensive suit and driving a BMW. He owned a successful real estate company and was known around town as a player. Mitch took photos with a small camera, documenting their embrace, their obvious intimacy. But unlike most betrayed husbands, he felt no pain, no shock. Instead, he felt something else entirely: opportunity. He'd been waiting for this moment for years, waiting for Beverly to show her true colors so completely that when he destroyed her, no one would question whether she deserved it. Chapter 2. Foundations of Betrayal. 20 years earlier, Mitch Sparks had been Mitchell Raymond Briggs, a different man entirely. He'd grown up in the foster system, learning early that the world was cruel and that survival meant being smarter, more ruthless, and more patient than everyone else around you. By 25, he'd built a small fortune through a combination of strategic investments and ventures that operated in the gray areas of legality. He was nobody's victim, nobody's fool. But then he'd met Beverly Bradshaw at a charity gala, and for the first time in his life, he'd wanted something beyond money and power. He'd wanted a normal life. Beverly had been beautiful, charming, and seemingly sweet. She came from a middle-class family and claimed to value simple things: love, family, stability. Mitch had seen her as a chance to build something real, something lasting. So he'd buried Mitchell Briggs and become Mitch Sparks, a mild-mannered office worker with modest ambitions. He'd legally changed his name, created a paper trail of the boring middle management job, and even set up a modest income to match his new persona. His real wealth remained hidden, managed through a complex network of shell companies and offshore accounts that even the IRS couldn't trace back to him. Beverly had fallen for the act completely. She'd married him believing she was getting a safe, predictable husband who would never challenge her or cause drama. What she'd really gotten was a predator who'd chosen to play house, until she gave him a reason not to. Meanwhile, Dennis Townsend had his own story. Born into wealth, he'd never faced real consequences for his actions. He'd cheated on his first wife, Courtney Clark, with multiple women before she'd finally divorced him. He'd built his real estate empire partly through legitimate means and partly by screwing over clients who trusted him. He was exactly the kind of man who would seduce another man's wife just because he could. Beverly and Dennis had met 6 months ago when she'd inquired about selling some property she'd inherited from her grandmother. Dennis had turned on the charm, and Beverly, bored with her predictable marriage and feeling entitled to more excitement, had fallen for it immediately. What neither of them realized was that Mitch had been tracking Dennis for years, waiting for the right moment to bring him down. Dennis had once cheated Mitch's elderly neighbor, Maggie McGuire, out of her family home through a predatory deal that was technically legal but morally bankrupt. Mitch had been planning Dennis's destruction long before the affair began. The affair was just the perfect catalyst for something much bigger. Chapter 3. The game begins. Maggie McGuire had been Mitch's neighbor for 15 years, and one of the few people he genuinely cared about. The elderly woman had lost her husband in Iraq and her son in Afghanistan, leaving her alone with only her small house and her memories. When she needed to sell for medical bills, Dennis had swooped in with an offer that was a fraction of the property's value, using complex legal language to hide the true terms until it was too late. Mitch had found Maggie crying on her porch the day she'd realized what had happened. He'd comforted her, helped her pack, and quietly ensured she had enough money to live comfortably in a nice senior community. But he'd never forgotten what Dennis had done to her. Now, sitting in his home office while Beverly was out with Dennis again, Mitch pulled out a secure phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. Raymond Briggs. Came the gravelly voice on the other end. "Hello, Ray. It's Mitchell." Raymond Briggs, who'd taken Mitch's discarded identity when he'd become Sparks, was Mitch's oldest associate and the one person who knew all his secrets. Ray had built his own empire over the years, operating from the shadows while Mitch played suburban husband. Well, the ghost returns. What's the occasion? I need to accelerate our timeline on the Townsend project, and I need you to prepare the Lazarus Protocol. The Lazarus Protocol was their code name for Mitch's plan to shed his fake identity and reclaim his power when the time was right. Like the mythical phoenix, he would rise from the ashes of his ordinary life more powerful than ever. How accelerated are we talking? 2 weeks. And Ray? This time, we're not just taking him down. We're taking everyone who betrayed me. The next morning, Mitch announced to his family that he'd been invited to speak at an important business conference. It was a lie, of course. He was actually meeting with Ray to finalize their plans. Beverly barely looked up from her phone. "How long will you be gone?" 3 days. Think you can manage without me?" She smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her in months. "Oh, I think I'll find ways to keep myself busy." Scott snorted. "Maybe you'll finally do something important for once." Katie shot her brother a disapproving look, but said nothing. She'd been watching the family dynamics more carefully lately, and, unlike Scott, she'd noticed that their father never seemed quite as helpless as he pretended to be. That evening, as Mitch packed his bag, he found Beverly in their bedroom, trying on a new dress, something expensive and revealing that she definitely hadn't bought for his benefit. "Special occasion?" he asked mildly. "Just felt like treating myself," she said, not meeting his eyes. "It's beautiful. Dennis will love it." Beverly froze, her face going white. "What did you say?" "I said Dennis will love it. Because that's who you bought it for, isn't it? Dennis Townsend, your lover." For a moment, Beverly looked terrified. Then her expression hardened into something ugly and defiant. "So what if it is? What are you going to do about it, Mitch? You don't have the backbone for a real fight." Mitch smiled. Not his usual mild, harmless smile, but something altogether more dangerous. "You know, Beverly, you're absolutely right. The man you married doesn't have the backbone for a fight. Lucky for me, I stopped being that man the moment you decided to betray everything we built together. Don't be ridiculous. You're a middle manager at an insurance company. You drive a 10-year-old sedan and buy your clothes at discount stores. What could you possibly do to someone like Dennis?" "I guess we'll find out," Mitch said calmly. "But I'll give you one chance, Beverly. End it with Dennis, and we can work this out quietly. Keep going, and I promise you'll regret it for the rest of your life." Beverly laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Are you threatening me? You? That's rich, Mitch. You couldn't intimidate a goldfish." "No," Mitch said, zipping up his suitcase. "I'm not threatening you. I'm promising you. There's a difference." As he walked toward the door, Beverly called after him. "Why divorce you? I'm taking everything. The house, the kids, whatever pathetic savings you have. Dennis has lawyers who will eat you alive." Mitch paused at the doorway, without turning around. "Beverly? You should probably enjoy these next few days. They're going to be the last happy ones you have for a very long time. Chapter 4. The Architect's Return. 3 days later, Mitch returned from his business conference a changed man. Or rather, he'd stopped pretending to be someone he wasn't. He walked into his house with a confidence that seemed to radiate from his very bones, carrying himself like a man who owned the world. Katie noticed immediately. "Dad, you seem different. Just had some good meetings, sweetheart." Sometimes a change of perspective is exactly what you need. Scott barely looked up from his video game. "Did you finally get promoted or something?" "Something like that," Mitch said, ruffling his son's hair, a gesture that somehow seemed less paternal and more predatory than it used to. Beverly was out, presumably with Dennis, so Mitch spent the evening with Katie, actually listening to her talk about school, her friends, her worries about the family. She was a perceptive kid, and she'd been carrying the weight of her parents' problems without anyone to talk to. "Dad," she said finally, "are you and Mom going to get divorced?" Mitch considered his answer carefully. Katie was innocent in all this, and while Scott had chosen his side, she deserved better than to be caught in the crossfire. "Katie, I want you to know that whatever happens between your mother and me, it won't be your fault. And no matter what anyone else says, I love you, and I always will." But not Scott. Scott is old enough to make his own choices about loyalty and respect, and choices have consequences. The next morning, Beverly came home with a glow that had nothing to do with her book club. She seemed surprised to find Mitch sitting at the kitchen table, reading the newspaper as if nothing had changed. "How was your conference?" she asked, though she clearly didn't care about the answer. "Illuminating. I learned a lot about myself." "That's nice," Beverly said dismissively, already heading upstairs. "Oh, and Beverly? I've scheduled a family meeting for tomorrow evening. 7 o'clock. Make sure you're here." She paused on the stairs. "A family meeting? What for?" "We need to discuss some changes that are coming. Important changes that will affect everyone." "What kind of changes?" Mitch looked up from his newspaper with that new, dangerous smile. "The kind that happen when people push too far and discover that not everyone is who they seem to be." That afternoon, while Beverly was out shopping, probably for more clothes to impress Dennis, Mitch received a visit from Courtney Clark, Dennis's ex-wife. She was an elegant woman in her 40s, with the bearing of someone who'd learned hard lessons about trusting the wrong people. "Mrs. Clark," Mitch said, inviting her in, "thank you for coming. Please call me Courtney. And thank you for reaching out. When your associate contacted me, I wasn't sure what to expect. I imagine Raymond can be intimidating when he wants to be." Courtney smiled grimly. "He explained that you might need my testimony about Dennis's character. I have to ask, is this about your wife?" "Among other things. Dennis destroyed someone I care about, and now he's destroying my family. I believe in consequences." "Then you and I understand each other perfectly. Dennis cost me everything I worked for, and he did it with a smile on his face. If you're planning to take him down, you have my full support." They spent 2 hours going over the details of Dennis's pattern of behavior, the financial manipulation, the emotional abuse, the way he targeted vulnerable women and exploited their trust. Courtney had documentation of everything, kept as insurance against the man who'd nearly destroyed her life. "He thinks he's untouchable," Courtney said as she prepared to leave. "Everyone in town thinks he's charming and successful. They don't see the predator underneath. They will," Mitch promised. "Very soon, everyone will see exactly what Dennis Townsend really is." Chapter 5. The Revelation. The family meeting that Beverly had dismissed as one of Mitch's usual attempts to assert authority turned out to be anything but typical. At precisely 7 o'clock, the Sparks family gathered in their living room, Beverly checking her phone constantly, Scott slouched his chair looking bored, and Katie sitting quietly, sensing that something important was about to happen. "Thank you all for being here," Mitch began, standing at the front of the room like he was addressing a board meeting rather than his family. "I know some of you think this is unnecessary, but I assure you, what I'm about to tell you will change everything." Beverly rolled her eyes. "Can we make this quick? I have somewhere to be." "I know exactly where you think you're going, Beverly. You're planning to meet Dennis Townsend at the Grandview Hotel, just like you have every Tuesday and Friday for the past 6 months. The blood drained from Beverly's face, but she quickly recovered, putting on a defiant expression. How dare you spy on me? How dare I? Mitch's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. How dare you bring your lover into our bed while our children slept down the hall? How dare you spend money I earned on gifts for another man? How dare you turn our son against me while you were busy betraying everything our marriage was supposed to represent? Scott finally looked up from his phone, confused. What's he talking about, Mom? Beverly's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Your mother has been having an affair, Mitch said calmly. With Dennis Townsend, a man who makes his living by cheating people out of their homes and their dignity. That's ridiculous. Beverly finally found her voice. You can't prove any of that. Mitch pulled out a manila folder and opened it on the coffee table, revealing photographs, hotel receipts, and phone records. Actually, I can prove all of it. But that's not why I called this meeting. He walked to the window and looked out at the darkening sky. You see, I've been living a lie for 20 years. I created a safe, predictable life because I thought that's what would make you happy. I became Mitchell Sparks, the humble office worker, because Beverly Bradshaw said she wanted a simple man who would love her and put family first. Beverly was shaking now, though whether from anger or fear was unclear. You're having some kind of breakdown, Mitch. You're scaring the children. No, Beverly. What's scary is what you've done to this family. What's scary is how you've poisoned our son against me while you were busy screwing another man. What's scary is that you actually thought I would just sit back and let you destroy everything I built. Scott jumped to his feet, his face red with anger. You can't talk to Mom like that. You're just a loser who can't provide for his family. You can't even afford a car. So shut your damn mouth. Beverly laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. He doesn't even feel disrespected because he's used to it. Mitch turned from the window, and his expression was something none of them had ever seen before, cold, calculating, and absolutely merciless. Outside, they could hear the distant sound of helicopter rotors approaching. Used to it, Mitch said quietly. You think I'm used to disrespect? Let me tell you something about respect, Scott. Respect isn't given to people because of what they drive or how much money they appear to have. Respect is earned through power, through intelligence, and through the ability to destroy anyone who threatens what you've built. The helicopter sound was getting louder. You want to know about cars, Scott? I own 17 of them, including a Bugatti that costs more than most people's houses. You want to know about money? I have more wealth than Dennis Townsend could dream of. You want to know about power? The helicopter was directly overhead now, its rotors drowning out everything else. Through the window, they could see it descending toward their front lawn, its spotlights illuminating the entire neighborhood. Mitch smiled. Not his old, harmless smile, but something predatory and triumphant. My ride's here. Scott's face had gone white as a sheet, his mouth hanging open in shock. Beverly swayed on her feet, her eyes rolling back as she fainted dead away, crashing to the floor. Katie stared at her father with wide eyes, but unlike the others, she didn't look terrified. She looked amazed. Chapter 6, The Phoenix Rises. As Beverly came to on the living room floor, she found herself looking up at a man she no longer recognized. The helicopter had landed on their front lawn, and through the window, she could see neighbors gathering at a safe distance, phones out, recording everything. What is this? She whispered. This, Mitch said, straightening his tie with practiced precision, is the end of Mitchell Sparks and the return of someone much more dangerous. A man in an expensive suit entered through the front door without knocking. Raymond Briggs, though he looked nothing like the mild-mannered office worker Mitch claimed to be. This man radiated authority and barely contained violence. Sorry I'm late, Ray said, his voice carrying the weight of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Had to make a stop at the Townsend place. Dennis sends his regrets. He's currently zip-tied in the back of a van, heading somewhere he can think about his life choices. Scott was hyperventilating. Dad, who are you? I'm the man who built a fortune before you were born, who could have bought this entire town if I'd wanted to. I'm the man who chose to bury his power in his past because he thought love and family were more important than money and respect. Mitch's voice was getting harder with each word. I'm the man who made the mistake of thinking that people like your mother and her lover could be trusted with that sacrifice. Beverly tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't support her. This is impossible. You work at Consolidated Insurance. You make $42,000 a year. Consolidated Insurance is one of 47 companies I own through various shell corporations. The man who's been signing your paychecks for the past 8 years works for me. Your lover, Dennis? 3 of his biggest real estate deals in the past 5 years were financed through my holdings. The hotel where you've been meeting him, I bought last week. Ray handed Mitch a tablet, showing security footage from the hotel hallway. Every encounter, every conversation, every moment of their affair has been recorded. But that's not the best part. What's the best part? Katie asked quietly. She was the only one who seemed to be handling this revelation with any composure. The best part, Mitch said, scrolling through the tablet, is that Dennis has been recording these encounters himself. Apparently, he's been blackmailing several of his married lovers, including your mother. The recordings he made are quite explicit. Beverly's face went ashen. He said those were private. He said he would never. Dennis Townsend is a predator who's been exploiting women like you for years. Did you really think you were special? Did you think you were the first married woman he convinced to betray her family? Ray pulled out a second tablet. Dennis has been running this scam for almost a decade. Seduce married women, record the encounters, then blackmail them for money or information about their husband's businesses. Your wife here just happened to pick the worst possible target. Scott was shaking his head in denial. This is all fake. You're making this up to try to win Mom back. Win her back. Mitch laughed, and the sound was genuinely amused. Scott, I wouldn't take your mother back if she was the last woman on earth. She made her choice when she decided that Dennis Townsend was worth more than 20 years of marriage. But more importantly, she made her choice when she turned you against me. I turned myself against you. You're pathetic. And whose voice do you think I hear when you say that? Whose words are coming out of your mouth? Your mother has spent months poisoning you against me, filling your head with her resentment and her contempt. Well, now you know the truth about both of us. Mitch walked over to the window, looking out at the helicopter waiting on their lawn. Beverly, you have a choice to make. You can come quietly, admit what you've done, and we can arrange a divorce that leaves you with enough money to rebuild your life. Or you can keep fighting me, and I can destroy you so completely that you'll end up with nothing but regret. Come quietly where? She whispered. To a very private facility where you and Dennis can face the consequences of your actions. Don't worry, it's not illegal exactly. Just unpleasant. Ray checked his watch. The van with Dennis should be arriving at the facility in about an hour. He's going to have some very interesting conversations with the husbands of the other women he's been blackmailing. Beverly looked around the room desperately, as if searching for an ally. Katie, sweetie, you don't believe this, do you? Your father has lost his mind. Katie looked at her mother with an expression far too mature for her 14 years. I believe Dad has been protecting us from something, and you just forced him to stop. Scott was still trying to process everything. So you're really rich and powerful, and you just pretended to be nobody. I became nobody because I thought being somebody would make it harder to be a good father and husband. I was wrong. Being nobody just made it easier for people to take advantage of me. But you can't just kidnap people. Scott protested. That's illegal. Mitch turned back to his son with an expression of profound disappointment. Scott, your mother has been cheating on me for 6 months. She's been teaching you to disrespect me while she betrayed everything our family was supposed to stand for. Her lover has been blackmailing her and planning to destroy our family for his own profit. And your concern is that what I'm doing might be illegal. I didn't know about the blackmail. You didn't know about any of it. But you chose to treat me like garbage anyway, because it was easier than thinking for yourself. The sound of car engines approaching interrupted the conversation. Through the window, they could see 3 black SUVs pulling up behind the helicopter. Time to go, Ray said. Mitchell, the teams are in position. Everything you requested has been arranged. Mitch looked at his family one last time. At Beverly, pale and terrified on the floor. At Scott, finally beginning to understand the magnitude of what he'd been part of. And at Katie, watching everything with intelligent, calculating eyes. Beverly, you're coming with me. You and Dennis are going to face justice for what you've done. And us. Katie asked quietly. You, sweetheart, are going to live with your Aunt Margaret while I clean up this mess. You'll be safe, you'll be provided for, and when this is over, you can decide if you want to be part of my life or not. What about Scott? Mitch looked at his son with eyes that held no warmth, no forgiveness. Scott made his choice. He can live with the consequences. Chapter 7. The Facility. The facility was a converted warehouse in an industrial part of the city, the kind of place where screams wouldn't carry and where people could disappear without anyone asking questions. It wasn't designed for torture. Mitch wasn't a sadist. It was designed for truth, for confrontation, and for the kind of justice that the legal system couldn't provide. Beverly sat in a stark white room, handcuffed to a metal chair, finally understanding that the man she'd married wasn't who she'd thought he was. Through a one-way mirror, she could see Dennis in the next room, zip-tied to his own chair, his expensive suit torn and his face bruised from his struggle with Ray's team. Mitch entered Beverly's room, carrying a file folder and a laptop. He'd changed clothes. Gone was the suburban dad uniform of khakis and polo shirts, replaced by a perfectly tailored black suit that cost more than most people's cars. I want you to understand something, Beverly, he said, setting the laptop on the table between them. What happens next isn't about revenge. It's about consequences. You can't just kidnap people, Mitch. This is insane. My name isn't Mitch. It never was. Mitch Sparks was a character I created because Beverly Bradshaw said she wanted a simple, honest man who would put family first. He opened the laptop and showed her a video file. This is who I really am. The video showed a younger version of her husband, but he looked nothing like the man she'd married. This version was harder, more dangerous, sitting across from men in expensive suits and discussing business deals worth millions of dollars. His voice was different too, colder, more commanding. I built my first million by the time I was 25, he continued. By 30, I controlled a network of businesses that spanned 3 countries. I could have been a billionaire by now if I hadn't decided that what I really wanted was a family. Beverly was shaking. Why didn't you tell me? Because you said you didn't want money and power. You said you wanted authenticity, simplicity, love. So I gave you exactly what you asked for. I became exactly the man you said you wanted to marry. I didn't ask you to lie to me, didn't you? When we first met, I tried to tell you about my business interests. You said you found ambitious men intimidating. You said you preferred men who were real and down to earth. So I became real and down to earth. The laptop showed another video, Dennis and Beverly in the hotel room, but not one of their romantic encounters. This was Dennis showing Beverly documents, talking about Mitch's pathetic financial situation, discussing how they could take everything in a divorce. He was using you, Mitch said quietly. From the very beginning, this was never about love or passion. Dennis researched me, found out about my fake identity, and decided you were the perfect tool to get inside my life and steal whatever he could. Beverly watched herself on the screen, laughing as Dennis talked about how easy it would be to clean out her husband. I didn't know he was recording us. You didn't know he was recording you having sex either, but he's been doing that too, along with all the other married women he seduced. You weren't special, Beverly. You were just another mark. In the next room, Dennis was having his own revelation. Courtney Clark sat across from him, flanked by 2 other women he'd victimized over the years. Hello, Dennis, Courtney said calmly. I'd like you to meet some friends of mine. The woman on her left was Maria Santos, a widow Dennis had convinced to sell her family home for a fraction of its value. The woman on her right was Dr. Sarah Chun, a successful surgeon whose marriage Dennis had destroyed by seducing her and then blackmailing her with the recordings. Ladies, Dennis said, trying to summon his usual charm despite being tied to a chair. This is all a misunderstanding. I can explain. Explain how you recorded us without consent. Dr. Chun interrupted. Explain how you used those recordings to blackmail us. Explain how you destroyed our lives for your own entertainment. Maria leaned forward, her eyes blazing with fury. You cost me my grandmother's house. The house where I raised my children, where my husband died. You took it from me with lies and manipulation, and then you sold it for 10 times what you paid me. That was business. Business. Courtney laughed bitterly. You call destroying families business? You call ruining lives business? Through the speakers, they could hear Beverly crying in the next room as Mitch showed her more evidence of Dennis's manipulation. Do you see what he really thinks of you? Mitch was saying. Do you see how little you meant to him? You threw away 20 years of marriage for a man who was using you as a pawn in a game you didn't even know you were playing. Chapter 8. The Price of Betrayal. Back at the Sparks house, Scott sat alone in his room, staring at his phone. The videos his friends had taken of the helicopter landing were all over social media, and the comments ranged from amazed to terrified. Nobody seemed to know who his father really was, but everyone agreed that this wasn't normal suburban dad behavior. Katie knocked on his door. Scott, can I come in? Whatever, he mumbled. She entered and sat on his bed, looking at him with concern. Are you okay? How can you ask me that? Our dad just kidnapped Mom and her boyfriend. He's apparently some kind of criminal mastermind. Nothing is okay. Is that really what you think? That dad is the bad guy here. Scott looked at his sister incredulously. He literally kidnapped people, Katie. Mom was cheating on him. For months. And from what I could tell, this Dennis guy was planning to rob us. So, that doesn't mean Dad could just go all vigilante on them. Katie was quiet for a moment, then said, Do you remember when Mom started acting different? When she started being mean to Dad all the time. She wasn't being mean. She was just tired of him being pathetic. Who told you he was pathetic? Scott opened his mouth to respond, then stopped. The truth was, he hadn't really thought his father was pathetic until his mother started saying it constantly. Before that, he thought his dad was pretty cool. He always helped with homework, never missed a game or school event, and he had a way of making everything seem okay, even when it wasn't. Mom said a lot of things. But did you ever actually see Dad fail at anything important? Did you ever see him back down from protecting us? Did you ever see him treat anyone badly? Scott thought about it. His father had never raised his voice, never been violent, never failed to provide for the family. Even when Scott had been cruel to him, especially in recent months, his dad had taken it without fighting back. Maybe, Katie continued, Dad wasn't pathetic. Maybe he was just kind, and maybe Mom took advantage of that kindness until he couldn't take it anymore. But he lied to us about who he is, about the money, about everything. Did he lie? Or did he just not tell us something that wasn't relevant to our lives? We had everything we needed. We were safe. We were loved. We were provided for. What difference would it have made if we'd known he was rich? Scott couldn't answer that. Meanwhile, at the facility, Beverly was learning exactly what difference it made. Mitch had shown her financial records proving that he'd been supporting not just their family, but also her parents' medical bills, her sister's mortgage payments, and even Scott's college fund, which was worth significantly more than she'd ever imagined. You could have lived like a queen, Mitch said, showing her pictures of the properties he owned around the world. Mansions, yachts, private jets. You could have had anything you wanted. All you had to do was stay loyal to the man who loved you. I didn't know, Beverly whispered. You never told me. You never asked. In 20 years of marriage, you never once asked about my past, my ambitions, my dreams. You were content to believe I was exactly what I appear to be on the surface. I thought you were happy being normal. I was happy being with you. There's a difference. I gave up everything I'd built because I thought having a family with you was worth more than all the money and power in the world. I was wrong. In the other room, Dennis was facing his own reckoning. The 3 women he'd victimized had been joined by 2 men, Maria's son and Dr. Chen's brother, both of whom looked like they wanted to tear Dennis apart with their bare hands. Please, Dennis said, his usual confidence completely gone. I can make this right. I have money. I can pay back. With what money? Courtney interrupted. Your business accounts have been frozen. Your properties have been seized. Your assets have been redistributed to the people you stole from. Dennis stared at her in shock. That's impossible. You can't just. I can't, came Mitch's voice over the intercom. But I can. While you've been sitting there, my people have been dismantling your entire operation. Every illegal deal, every blackmail scheme, every piece of property you obtained through fraud, it's all being unwound. You can't prove any of that. Actually, I can. You see, Dennis, I've been watching you for years. Ever since you cheated my neighbor out of her home, I've been building a case against you. The affair with my wife just gave me the perfect opportunity to spring the trap. Dr. Chin leaned forward. The recordings you made of us? They've been turned over to the police, along with evidence of your blackmail schemes, your fraudulent business practices, and your pattern of sexual exploitation. Maria's son spoke for the first time, his voice low and dangerous. You destroyed my mother's life. Took away the only thing she had left to my father. For what? Money? Profit? I was just doing business. No. Mitch's voice came through the speakers again. You were being a predator, and predators need to face consequences. Chapter 9. Phoenix Rising. 1 week later, the story hit the national news. Suburban dad revealed as secret millionaire in elaborate revenge plot, read the headlines, but they didn't capture the full truth of what had happened. Dennis Townsend was in federal custody, facing charges for blackmail, fraud, and sexual exploitation. The evidence Mitch had gathered over the years, combined with the testimonies of his victims, painted a picture of a serial predator who had destroyed dozens of lives for profit and entertainment. Beverly was facing her own legal troubles. While adultery wasn't a crime, conspiracy to commit fraud was, and the evidence showed she'd been actively helping Dennis plan to steal from Mitch during their divorce proceedings. But the real story was about justice, and about what happened when someone pushed the wrong person too far. Mitch sat in his real office, not the modest cubicle where Mitch Sparks had pretended to work, but the top floor of a glass tower overlooking the city. The walls were lined with awards and photographs, documenting a career most people could only dream of. Katie sat across from him, looking small in the enormous leather chair. She'd chosen to come live with him rather than with Beverly's sister, saying she wanted to understand who her father really was. Do you regret it? She asked. Giving up all this to be normal? Mitch considered the question carefully. I regret trusting people who didn't deserve it. I regret believing that love was more important than respect. But I don't regret trying to build something real with your mother, even though it failed. What about Scott? This was the hardest question. Scott had chosen to stay with Beverly's sister, refusing to speak to Mitch after everything that had happened. He'd sent a letter saying he couldn't forgive what his father had done, regardless of what his mother had done first. Scott made his choice, Mitch said finally. He chose to side with the people who betrayed our family, rather than the man who sacrificed everything for it. That's his decision to live with. But he's your son. He's Beverly's son. I may have provided the genetic material, but she shaped his values, his loyalty, his character. And those things matter more than blood. Kitty nodded thoughtfully. She was wise for her age, probably because she'd been forced to grow up fast in a house full of secrets and lies. So what happens now? Now, Mitch said, looking out at the city he'd once thought about ruling before he'd chosen love instead. I go back to being who I really am. No more pretending to be harmless. No more hiding my power. No more trusting people who haven't earned it. And me, you get to decide who you want to be. You can choose to be like your mother and brother. People who take loyalty for granted and think they're entitled to betray the people who love them. Or you can choose to be something better. That evening, Mitch attended a charity gala. Not as the humble insurance worker who occasionally volunteered, but as the mysterious benefactor who'd been anonymously funding half the charities in the city for the past 20 years. The recognition was surreal after so long in the shadows. Mitchell Briggs, the mayor said, shaking his hand, I have to say, when we found out you'd been behind so many of our community programs, we were amazed. You've been operating under our noses for decades. I prefer to work behind the scenes, Mitch replied. It's easier to get things done when people don't know who you are. And the situation with your family? I hope you know you have the city's full support. What that man did to those women, it's unconscionable. Justice was served. That's all that matters. Later, as he drove home to his real house, a modernist mansion in the hills that he'd owned for 15 years but never lived in, Mitch reflected on the cost of his choices. He'd gained back his power, his identity, his ability to shape the world around him. But he'd lost his family, or at least the illusion of family he'd tried to build. Beverly was facing trial. Scott wanted nothing to do with him. Only Katie remained, and she was still figuring out whether she could accept who he really was. His phone buzzed with a text from Ray. Townsend pled guilty to all charges. 15 to 25 years. The other women are finally getting justice. Mitch smiled grimly. Dennis Townsend would spend the next 2 decades learning what it meant to be powerless, to be at the mercy of people who didn't care about his comfort or his dignity. Beverly's trial was still pending, but with the evidence against her, she'd likely accept a plea deal that would leave her with a criminal record and enough debt to ensure she'd never live comfortably again. The Phoenix had risen from the ashes of Mitch Sparks, but the flight had come at a cost. Power was lonely, justice was expensive, and trust, once broken, was nearly impossible to rebuild. But as Mitch Briggs looked out at the city lights spreading below his mansion, he knew he'd made the right choice. He'd learned the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes the people you love most are the ones who deserve it least. And sometimes the only way to protect what matters is to stop pretending to be someone you're not. In the end, the meek might inherit the earth, but they didn't get to keep it. That privilege belonged to those strong enough to take it back when it was stolen from them. Mitch Briggs was home. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.